You are listening to More Than a Sniff, a weekly podcast of Western States Canine College. I'm Joe, owner and principal trainer here with my colleagues Chris, Michelle, and Shannon. Today, we are going to talk about
Rebecca. And Rebecca is one of Western States Canine College long-time client. And so we're first going to start with Rebecca introducing herself and tell us a little bit about your dog ownership journey.
Hi, I'm Rebecca, and I currently own a adopted out of a shelter black lab who's about 9.
Wow.
I know. And an adopted out of a home with the help of Western States German Shepherd who's, I guess, about 13.
Yeah, 11. She's as old as Bora, maybe a year older. So yeah. 12.
12, 13, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
And prior to these two, I had another adopted out of a shelter dog who came to me through a foster family and then died relatively suddenly. And I only had him for 18 months. Prior to that, I had never even really met a dog before. So my dog ownership is now 8 years about. And before that, I didn't have any experience with dogs at all.
So in our journey together, and I didn't meet you until, oh, that's Rebecca's phone.
You can just.
I didn't meet you with your first black lab, but we came into each other's life because of Austin.
Yes.
And so tell me a little bit about going from a dog that you had adopted from a foster home and didn't really feel like you needed anything, everything kind of meshed together, to kind of the initial parts of Austin's life.
Well, it was horrifying, to be perfectly honest. I had no idea what to expect when adopting Austin. And I essentially did it in a moment of definite grief for the loss of my first dog. Mm-hmm. And since that had gone so smoothly with zero effort on my part, I expected the next adoption to be exactly the same. I didn't even think that anything would be different. I just had to find a cute dog, mm-hmm. Which I did immediately. And he was at the shelter, he was very personable to me. He walked into the little room and immediately put his paws up on my lap, which I loved. And I didn't think longer than about 2 more minutes. And I said, I'll take him. And I put him in the car and he slept the whole way home. And then I brought him into my house where I had a little elderly cat that had been best friends with my other dog. And I was very excited for them to meet, thinking all would go well. And I let Austin off the leash, and he immediately tried to eat the cat, which gave me a little glimmer of insight into what I had just done. Uh-huh. And I immediately called the woman who had fostered my other dog. And I was essentially in tears and said, "This is different. What do I do?" And she said, "Don't worry. It's all fine. It'll all be over in about 6 months. He'll adjust. He'll be the dog that you think you want. It's going to be great." And I said, okay, I can do this. And then I started to get to know Austin. And it became clear within about a day that I was in over my head in terms of having a dog that definitely fit the criteria of being cute, and definitely had some of the personality traits that attracted me in the first minute of knowing him, and that he was very snugly in my house, and mm-hmm. he would seemed in my house to be pretty quickly bonded to me. But as soon as we'd walk out the door, he lost all interest in me, and would become a wild animal on the leash. And I lived right downtown in busy Salt Lake with lots of other dogs, and he was essentially unmanageable in that situation. And I think even experienced you, Joe, would agree that he was unmanageable. He ripped big blisters in my hands just trying to walk him around the block, and then was completely disconnected to me outside, but then inside he was this gigantic 70-pound animal that, yes, was snuggly, but was also going stir crazy if I couldn't get him out of the house. And I had a relatively small house and a small backyard, and felt like I needed to be able to give him some exposure outside of the confines of our little area. And I was stuck.
Yep. Okay. What did you learn about yourself through the journey of training Austin?
That's a good question. Definitely a lot of things. Let me think for a second. Well, I definitely felt like going into it, once I realized I needed help and connected Western States, connected myself to Western States, I learned definitely that I had the patience that it took, which I've always felt like was a part of my personality. But I also recognized, I guess, that maybe something that was surprising to me was that I wanted to be involved in the process pretty deeply. And as Joe knows, before she and I started working closely together, I had experimented with having Austin go to sort of a boot camp situation where someone else would train him, and he'd come back to me. And in theory, I think I really liked that idea that I could send him away and he could be a perfect dog, come back to me. But in what I learned through that process is it didn't work for me and it didn't work for Austin. And I personally I was fascinated with the process, as frustrating as it was at times, but I wanted to be involved. And over the years, it's definitely, Austin has shown me that has been beneficial. Our relationship has definitely improved. And
so with you being involved in the training, we've always talked about, and especially on the podcast, from the emotions that dogs create in our household, good and bad, to creating a connection. What were some of the emotions that you went through this big journey? Because it was big and it was hard, and definitely not having the patience. He probably would have ended back into this system because it was bad. It was bad. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I remember really clearly the first meeting that we had together, Joe. And you said to me, like, I will never forget this, because you said to me, after hearing the whole story about Austin and my previous dog and what my life is like and everything else about us, you said, well, I have to be honest, I don't think Austin is the right dog for you. Mm-hmm. And that was devastating to me, because I loved him. Like I always say to friends of mine who are going through difficult times with their dogs, that the training process allowed me to learn to like a dog that I had always loved. Mm-hmm. And so I did, even in the beginning, really love him, but I really didn't like him.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you said that he wasn't the right dog for me, I it was both devastating, but also like a little bit of a challenge because I remember feeling like, well, I'm not going to put this dog back into the system. I'm not going to give him up. And what do I need to do to make our lives right for each other?
Yeah.
And part of that was definitely realizing that the things I had done with my previous dog, just willy-nilly take him everywhere and go out for hikes in Mill Creek with 1,000 other dogs, was probably not going to be what I could ever maybe do with Austin. And coming to that realization was difficult. And I still struggle with it. I mean, I still have to really think, okay, am I going to put him in a situation where he's not going to succeed? And then if I realize either I've unfortunately done that and put him in a situation where he's not going to succeed, or I'm about to do that, I get sad. I mean, truly, I do. I'm like, darn it. This is what I want to do, and I want him to be able to do this, and I can't do it because it's not right for him. So certainly, to get back to your question, like just a sense of like loss and sort of grief around what my vision of this particular dog relationship could be. But then at the same time, as you know, I became passionate about what I could do with him. And so I definitely remember back in the beginning too, even though you had given me this devastating news that he wasn't the right dog for me, we continued that. You didn't say that and say, therefore I'm not your trainer anymore.
Right.
You said that, and then we moved on to the next steps, and which were intensive training. And definitely that first year to 3 years, probably we met at least once a week, and many times, 4 times a week with all I did a lot of group classes with you. And that was the most fun thing of my life at the time, even though it was sort of balanced with this sense of frustration and some sadness. I still got a lot of excitement and happiness out of the things that I could achieve with him, and the weekly successes that we would have was amazing and really fun.
So what advice would you give people out there that are struggling? That I don't know. It's been a long time in as far as my training career that I had a dog like Austin to work with. Nothing was new. None of his behaviors wasn't anything that I hadn't worked with, but boy, we had to really dig deep into his little soul and figure out what worked. And so, what would you give people that are on the verge of giving up, or just want to kind of throw their hands up and keep the dog in the house and say, this is going to be your life?
I think the biggest thing to recognize is that it's a commitment. And I would advise a friend or an acquaintance that if you don't have either the time or the emotional commitment to just go with it and trust the process and go with the ups and downs and the frustrations and the surprises, then maybe it's not the right dog for you. And maybe that is truly the right comment and the right path to take. But if you're committed to the dog like I was, and feel like you have some wiggle room to make a different life than that maybe that you imagined, I think the biggest thing that I did that hopefully you felt was trust the process. And I remember talking to you about this even. Every week I would have practiced the homework that you gave me and had, limited success with some things, but surprises with other things that I wasn't prepared for that didn't work. And I remember just watching you come every week, and instead of jumping into the next lesson, you would watch first and listen. You'd listen to what I had to say, and you'd watch how Austin was responding. And then I could really almost literally see the wheels turning in your brains thinking, okay, what do we do next? So it really felt like not a cookie cutter approach, but just a tailoring to Austin. And that definitely took trust on my part because I wasn't ever able to look in a book and say, okay, this week we're going to learn how to walk on a loose leash. Next week we're going to learn how to get a recall. And each week we'd go into a lesson and I would have no idea where the lesson was going to go. And I remember very clearly at the end of almost every single lesson being like, wow, I never would have anticipated that this was the next the next step in the training process. It just wasn't something that, that's not me this time. It wasn't whatever your next creative training step was never something that I had thought might come next.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I think if I had been going into it with a different mindset or a different personality, I might have resisted and been like, that's not going to work. But I just had to go with it and do whatever you said to do and try it. And ultimately we came to success. So I think that was a long way of saying, I think trust the process. If you're committed to the dog, trust the training process and go through it with the intention of deepening your relationship with the dog, because that's ultimately what it is all about, is the relationship with the dog.
Yeah. Shannon, do you have some questions?
Yeah. So I was just hoping that you talk a little bit about the difference in your relationship between having a dog that was really easy and natural for you to train and one that was very difficult, and like where you are now in your relationship, how that is between the dogs. Every relationship's different, so it's hard to compare them, but I just want to hear a little about that.
Yeah, that is a good question. I mean, certainly the first dog I had, I don't even know if he was like a real live non-spirit animal when I adopted him, because it's not even like he was easy to train. It was like he didn't require anything from me. So I didn't have to, part of your question gets at, I think, when you're asking about the relationship, I'd never went through training with this other dog. And so in some ways, and I only had him for 18 months, so I didn't have the long history that I have with Austin. And my memories of it are all wonderful. Like I never had any problems at all. And potentially if I still owned him, my memories would be different. But I can say that going through all this with Austin, I definitely have a deeper relationship with him. I mean, I feel like I know him incredibly well. And even though he still does things that surprise me occasionally, I can pretty much predict what situations will be successful for him and what situations will be difficult for him, and I can help him through that, and that's rewarding. I think that as frustrating as the whole experience was, I definitely will never have a relationship with a dog like I have with Austin, because we've just been through so much together. And so I think it's hard to compare that to this other dog that was, in my memory anyway, perfect in every way, but I definitely had a good bonded relationship with him, and he looked to me for everything, but I didn't have to work with him through anything. And so it's definitely different.
It definitely, I always believe that dogs, I guess animals in general, but just because it's, dogs are so much part of us that they come into our lives for a reason. And long or short, I've had some dogs that have been in my life for 6 months and others that have been in for a long time. And I think that each one of them prepare us for what's next. And I've always felt, Rebecca, with never being a dog owner never, like, what is that supposed to look like, right? How is this supposed to work, to having this dog come in, with Gordo, that he's, this is what it's like having a dog. And so you have this vision, but I think it prepared you to take you and shoot to get Austin there, even though we never have, but I think it, Gordo prepared you for, like, emotionally, that's what kept you going.
That's true.
And so, talk to us a little bit about how Hannah, the German Shepherd, came into this life of yours.
Yeah, this is a great story. So I remember when I first got Austin, and he was so disconnected from me, but I would take him to dog parks, and he'd seem, in my naive assessment of dog interactions, to be responding to other dogs. I remember asking one of Joe's staff members at the time whether I should get a second dog, because maybe he just needed a dog friend. And this trainer who worked for Joe said, no, definitely not, because then you'll just end up with two who are like Austin. And I was like, oh gosh, no, I don't want that.
Let's not do that.
And so I just, similarly to what I was talking about before, had a moment of grief, like, oh, darn, I kind of wanted two dogs at some point, but I don't want to do anything to harm Austin. He's my priority. And so if I can't have two dogs, then I won't. And so one of the surprising things, like I was mentioning before about the training process, one day, literally in the middle of a lesson, or at the beginning of a lesson, actually, Joe said to me and my wife, Ann, well, I've decided what the next step for you is. And I was like, okay, what are we're going to use treats differently or something is where my mind was going. And Joe, you said, we need to get a dog for Austin to teach him how to be a dog, because there are things we've kind of exhausted our human ability to communicate with him. Yep. And we need a canine to be able to tell him when it's appropriate to act a certain way and when he can't act a certain way. And there's no further communication that we can do as a human to tell him that. And I thought that was fascinating. And as much as I wanted to just go out and instantly adopt the next dog, again, I sat back and trusted the process. And Joe said that she would find the perfect dog. And so waited and waited and waited, and I think it took us 6 months.
It was about that long, yeah.
Which felt like a brutally long time to wait. But then I remember I was at work one day, and Joe texted me and said, we have a dog. And she's a 7-year-old alpha German Shepherd who is very well trained and will be great for Austin. And so this is a dog that Joe, it actually made me really happy at the time, because Hannah, this German Shepherd, was your first client,
very
right?
first, Western States' very first client. Yep.
So that, after having gone through all of this with Joe and Austin, I felt very bonded to Joe and to Western States, and there was just that part of it was really special to me, that this dog Joe knew so well and had been part of the Western States training family for her whole life, even though I didn't know her at all. And that it was a dog that you as a trainer knew and trusted and really knew what to expect from. And so she had been in a wonderful home, but the home had gone through some changes and they needed to rehome her for personal reasons. And so she just came to be available at a perfect time. Yeah. And so we brought her over for an introduction and took Austin and Hannah with her old owner on a walk together. And they seemed to get along just fine. Yeah,
I think she went after him once.
Yeah, I don't even remember that.
And then she was like, okay, then come on now. It was this really, and then Austin's like, oh my gosh, I don't know. And then then we just went. Like, it was just this, like, she just had to tell him that I'm taking over, and then we went, yeah.
We did a 2-week trial period with Hannah, but we didn't need I felt like as soon as I met her, I was like, okay, this is going to be fine.
Yeah.
And so we didn't even really truly need the 2-week trial period. She was instantly part of our little family, and instantly really helpful for Austin. I mean, he does still struggle with even with her, but she was able to both, as Joe just mentioned, like tell him how to behave, but also take, because of her personality, both just independently and also being a shepherd and an alpha dog, she takes on the role of surveillance and guarding and taking control. And it was very interesting to watch Austin just be able to soften in reaction to that, that when she was around, and especially outside walking really is when it makes a difference for him. He could just sort of fall back and not feel like he had to constantly survey the scene and notify everyone about any approaching dog or squirrel or bird. And it worked quite immediately. We didn't really, once Hannah came into the picture, we didn't really have to do training with the two of them. We continued to work with Austin and train, but we didn't have to like help me figure out how to have two dogs or how to tell Hannah what to tell Austin. It was just
it was real natural.
Quite natural,
yeah. So where's your journey right now?
Well, both dogs are doing very well, and as I mentioned in the beginning, they're both getting towards the older side, which is shocking to me. We live now not right in the middle of Salt Lake, but up in the mountains, and they have a big yard and a mountain. And in terms of their lives, they're doing great. They don't really need training anymore, even though I love it. They're fine. And so in part because of how well they're doing, and in part because of their aging years and my learned passion for training, we're gonna get a little puppy soon.
And then what's in store next?
For
another puppy?
Yes.
I think we all get the bug, and you start somewhere, and when you get to a happy place, it's fun to add healthy things into the pack, and I think we're excited. We're excited to have a little border terrier in the family. So if there is anything that you would want to say to all of our listeners, from one, taking on a journey of a rescue dog to changing over to getting a purebred dog, kind of what shifted your mind maybe there, or where are you at with that?
Yeah, that is a really good question. In part, one thing that I've always regretted about both Austin and Hannah is that I didn't know them as puppies. There's no way I could have these dogs in my life and have known them as puppies, obviously, but I feel like I just wish I knew them as puppies, because it would even deepen that relationship more. And so I feel part of this is that I really want a puppy. But your question about adopting a rescue dog versus a dog from a breeder is a good one. And it's definitely something I never predicted in my life before knowing you guys. I guess I had always, not knowing anything about dogs, I just felt like there's so many dogs out there. Adopt one out of a shelter, and don't adopt don't get a dog from a breeder. And this journey with Austin has definitely taught me the limitations. I don't know how to say it without being disparaging of Austin.
You're
and
you're good.
His kind, but I'm excited about getting a puppy from a breeder that we know the temperament of the parents. We know the temperament of the breed of the dog. Again, similar to the training process, I left the picking of the breed process completely in your hands with just a few criteria.
Yeah.
And so I am excited to just go with that process as well, and hopefully end up with a dog that sort of fulfills all of these visions that I've had for dog ownership.
Yeah.
And allows me to both know it from a puppy, but also really do the training myself with your assistance, of course.
Yep.
And really learn about the dog, and then have a dog, both in terms of breed and temperament, that really matches our family.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that going through this process of adopting from a breeder will allow our family to have that
Right.
in a dog.
Yeah. And I think, Rebecca, you said some really key things about adopting from a breeder. We're always of the mindset that one, they all need homes. We're not going to ever stop breeders, and nor should we. There's fabulous breeds out there that, we shouldn't be trying to stop this process, but getting one from a good, reputable breeder that lays a good foundation for us. But if you get a puppy from a breeder, then to me, that's a bigger commitment, because now everything's on you. And it's your job to keep them out of the shelter. And that's one of the biggest challenges. We get these puppies, they're cute, they're fun, but they do end up in shelters. And so I think, as you adopting one from a breeder is a fabulous word, because I think that's a bigger responsibility, where you go to the shelter and you adopt one, and boy, there's challenges. And sometimes, there's a lot of people that couldn't go through Austin stuff. And to take him back, I get it. That's hard. But you didn't create it either. And so, I commend you for sticking through Austin, because it was a big journey. And I also think that it's fabulous that you're taking on the responsibility of owning a puppy, because now it's really all on you. And sometimes that's a bigger responsibility than rescuing a dog. Michelle, do you have any questions? Shannon, do you have any dog?
I have one more question now, which is, what were your criteria that you gave to Joe, and how did you choose that breed based on those criteria?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, one of the funny criteria, given that we have two 70-pound dogs right now, is that we wanted a dog that could be a lap dog, which I, again, never thought I would ever want. But a few dogs in our larger circle have opened my mind to the idea of a small dog, plus the death of our elderly cat that I mentioned earlier in this session.
Not by Austin,
Not
by
by Austin or Hannah,
Yeah.
just by natural causes.
Yep.
She was 20 years old.
Yep.
We've lost our little lap friend, and so that was one criteria, probably the really main one. And then the other criteria was really, okay, you know me and our family better than probably anyone in the world at this point. You know what we want to do and what we like to do, so what dog would be good for us? We want to be able to hike and go to the barn, but also when we're reading and sitting by the fire, we want to chill and not have a hyper animal that we feel like we need to get out. We want to be able to chill, but we want to be able to go for a run or go for a hike.
So the process started knowing Rebecca, and I value that as being a dog trainer, of the people and the friends that we have made through this dog journey, and it's been fabulous. And so I sat down with an intern and Michelle here, and didn't tell them who it was that we were making this dog selection for, because I already had some ideas in my head, but it's always good to, let's just talk about, we have to find a dog, and here's the criteria. And so I sent them on this journey a little bit as far as start throwing dogs my way. Here's the criteria. It needs to be small. It needs to be able to be out hiking. It needs to be able to survive mountain lions and whatnots that's up in the canyons. Gosh, what else, Michelle, did I give you guys?
Barn, or the horse.
Horses, being around horses.
Something that could cuddle, but
something that could cuddle.
Something that could cuddle, but you guys both work really hard, so it also needed to be alone sometimes.
Yep.
I'm trying to think. I figured out who you were within like a few days. Like I was like, Joe, I know who it is. And she was like, no, you don't. I was like, I do. I can't remember. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So Melissa started throwing breeds, and being new into the dog training world, she was one super, I guess not excited's not the right word, but free in her mind, like no opinions, no thought process, like haven't worked with any specific breeds. And so she's like digging and throwing. And Michelle took about a week before she started coming around with some breeds, because we start getting our opinions in the way of what we're looking for. And so my first pick was the Papillon, and so a week goes by and we get back together, and Melissa had sent some Jack Russell, Karen Blue Terrier. I can't remember the other one that she had brought up. And then Michelle said, Joe, I mean, a Papillon definitely fits the criteria.
Absolutely.
But probably would get eaten up in the canyons, even by a bird of prey. So
I was so worried about that. I have a Papillon, and he's been almost picked up by an owl before. So I was like, I don't know, Joe.
Yeah. And so then we start brainstorming some more, and as we were sitting there, we're like, what about a border terrier, and then we kind of went through a couple other ones, and then the goal was finding the breeder, and they're tough. They are tough, and Melissa, again, being non-opinionated, just reaching out to breeders, and I had them call and email and get in touch with, and bring their results back from their responses from the email, and we went through that process of, what breeder are we going to work with. So we found the breeder that made the most sense to us as dog trainers on how they imprint the puppies, the process, how they do the selection. And then we kind of turned everything over to Rebecca to talk to them. And now they're 5 weeks. And so we should start getting videos, and starting probably next week, I'm guessing we'll start seeing some videos to start selecting from there. But that's how it came about. That's kind of where it was. Rebecca, we definitely have a plan for the future, and talked about getting a German Shepherd puppy from the monks, and their process and their waiting list is incredibly long. But there's also, we have a little German Shepherd puppy here from Germany that we might just go with his breeder as well. So there's different options. So you definitely should have a plan, and it takes a while. It takes a while to make the decision. And at first I, had to push Rebecca and go, is that okay with this? Because we've got 3 dogs in the hangar here that, and so we really had to talk about what the plan is, what the training plan is, and work schedule, and, how we're going to make this all come together. So, it's been fun to have, Rebecca, who's gone through the journey. No, this is what it's going to take. So that's how it is. Rebecca, do you have any questions for us?
I don't think so.
Okay. We have enjoyed you being on the show, and enjoyed you as a client, and enjoyed you as being part of our Western States Canine College family. And we're going to have you on again when this new little guy comes in, and just kind of talk about your journey. And I think people should hear that and be a part of it, and kind of enjoy that part of it, because there's going to be some hard times as well. So I think it'll be great. If you're open for it, we will like to have you back and share your
great.
journey.
I would
Okay.
love to.
Okay. Anything else? Okay.
Thank you for listening. If you want to know more about us and our services, please visit our website at www.wsk9co.com. And as always, we urge you to get out and train.